recording started. And I will welcome you all. Thank you so much for gathering once again tonight. We are excited to join again in conversation and to talk about where we as a project have been discerning God's leading. And tonight we're going to focus especially on our second word of our CARE acronym, which is action. We have had a couple of meetings to this point and have given more background on what has brought us here and where we discern ourselves heading. And so there are previous Zoom conversations that you can look at, and those are linked on the email that was sent out today, and they're also available from our YouTube channel. So rather than going back and rehashing much of what we've covered, we're going to just go ahead and dive right in now with the second letter of our acronym, which is A for care. And to start, we are going to practice some contemplation using one of the practices offered from the Gravity Center, which we'll be exploring a little bit more in just a little while. So first, I invite you to find yourself where you are, to get centered in your body, to get centered in your space. And if you'd like to gently close your eyes and take a few deep breaths right now. I invite you to breathe in the holy breath, Spirit of God. And with your breath out, to release all of the stress of the day. As you continue to breathe deeply, I invite you to enter this prayer based on Psalm 46. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know that I am. Be still and know. Be still and know. Be still. Be still. Be. Be. Amen.
Meister Eckhart said, "What we plant in the soil of contemplation, we shall reap in the harvest of action." There are so many needs for action in our world: action to meet immediate and pressing needs, action to work for systemic and long-term change. When was the last time you went a week without an action alert in your email inbox? All of that action can be exhausting, especially in the face of such big problems and human suffering. We hope the centering space can be a resource to ground the action we take in a wellspring of spiritual growth. We also hope to be a resource for many in our community who are engaged in social justice. Let's pause for a moment to reflect on a few questions. What actions have you felt yourself called to in the past or in the present? What has been or is needed to engage in those actions? Where have you found energy and where have you been drained?
Tonight we turn to A for action. And we've talked a lot, we've used a lot of words to try to describe some of where we see this project going. And as we've mentioned a few times, there are some other centers around the country and around the world that have similar goals and aims. And so we thought rather than continuing to try to describe what we're thinking about, we would actually take a look at some of those together. The Gravity Center is based in Omaha, Nebraska, and they call themselves a Center for Contemplative Activism. I'll say that again, a Center for Contemplative Activism. The Gravity Center continues to operate as they have because nearly all of their offerings have been and remain online. Although they also have retreats and events, and they offer speakers and spiritual direction. So let's take a look together to see what they have to offer on their website. As you can see, it's a clean looking website. The black and white stands in contrast to the motion of the pictures that are scrolling through. And there is this sense of movement, but also this sense of being centered. On their website, they have a handful of different categories: mindful silence, the Enneagram, You can learn more about them and their community and the vision. There are ways to join them, to support the work they do, and also to participate in the work that they do. There are ways to interact with them in various medias. You can email, or they're on Facebook, Twitter. They have various channels on Vimeo and YouTube. We can also host an event or a podcast, and there are ways to support. But right now, I invite us to take a look at the practice that they offer. So going to their practice tab, we see a number of offerings. The one that I just led came directly from the Gravity Center website. And for each of these different spiritual practices, they offer simple instructions along with often a couple of variations and a lot more information for anybody who's interested in digging deeper or going further. So for the Be Still that we just did, for example, there is a video that they have produced that we could have watched as well. It's taking a little bit longer to load, so I'm going to go to Centering Prayer. Centering prayer is one of the things that we talked about a little bit in contemplation, and many of these practices are very ancient practices that have developed over centuries and have found some newfound energy and excitement. So here you can see that they've got YouTube instructions. They've got a video, one of their people leading centering prayer and talking about it. They have instructions, and then they have a number of resources, more information about centering prayer, more ways to practice it. So that's just one example of the practices that they offer online. They do quite a bit around Enneagram work, which is actually how I became acquainted with them. And many of these practices that you see are going to be familiar to those of us on the call: Examen, the Labyrinth, Lectio Divina, Pilgrimage, Spiritual Direction, Welcoming Prayer, Yoga. So this is a resource that anybody can access. And then if we were to go to interact with them, for example, we could also check out their Vimeo page, where they have a number of different videos, reflections, webinars on wellness, on mental health, on spiritual health. And all of these are geared towards the fueling of the activist spirit. A center for contemplative activism, again, is what they call themselves. And so there are many ways that they live out that calling, and primarily that happens online. It's a wonderful website and a wonderful resource. I'm going to stop sharing it just because it's something that you also can access on your own at any time. But as we look through that website, seeing what they're doing, what does this spark for you? I wonder how many of you have, I'm not sure how many of you have actually seen the website before. I know we've mentioned it before, but feel free to chime in. You'll just need to unmute yourself.
I personally think it looks exciting because it offers all kinds of ways that we can begin to actually create a center in a time when more and more people are going online to find those kinds of resources. So it almost feels timely.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thinking, I know anybody can access that website at home. But once we are back in business again, and we have our centering space up in what has been the harbor room, it would really be nice to have a large screen television there that someone could, if they were going to use that space for some type of a reflection, retreat, personal retreat or small group, then they would be able to actually do that and access all of that up there. So I'd like to see in the future a good television, large screen that we could use there, and also to make certain that we're adapting that space for any of the physical activities that might be involved in some of the practices that they've shared.
Mm-hmm.
My response is, let me think. I agree that it seems timely to have the online resources, though at the same time, I have always learned better with a personal teacher. I didn't grow up, obviously, in the era of online learning. I'm not sure I would have been very good at it. I just look forward to something that involves, more face-to-face, teacher, student type of thing, I guess.
This guy says amen.
I would certainly hope that this will be an ongoing both and, that once we're able to do these things face to face, that would be an avenue that we would pursue with great energy. But in the meantime, if we can get people introduced and started and familiar with, then the online feels like a possibility. And the way they have done it at Gravity looks like they've done some real interactive stuff.
I would agree that it certainly is desirable to be able to do a lot of these things directly and with people actually in the same room. And I think that I would also agree with Mary Lou that thinking of it as both and this website design, particularly to me at least, seems like it immediately holds your attention, and it's very simple. It's very clear to sort of understand what's being put in front of you, and it looks like it would serve as an effective tool for inviting people to come into the physical space by way of this online portal. So if people want to move from the online platform to the direct physical platform, this seems like a good way to tell people that the physical platform exists once it does.
I would like to ask a question. With the Gravity Center, there was a comment that everything they do is sort of that online format, and it's also called Activism. So I'm not sure I understand how those two, for them, what that means.
Most of what they do, or rather the way that most people interact with them, is through their online presence. So they have, I think, a real global following, and they do have speakers that go out and they lead retreats, and then they have some programming on site where they are, and then they have retreats that are, I think, take place a little bit further out. But if we were to look for their vision, look at their vision statement. I'm just pulling that up right now. While I'm overloading my internet connection, I hope we'll see how they tie it a little bit more explicitly to activism. But I think one of the differences for us would be that we do see this first and foremost as a community resource, and something that we are drawing on the resources of those who live within the community and many in the neighborhood, and hoping to interact and build community locally, so that it would very much be, it wouldn't be that we're trying to establish an online, primarily online resource, but that the online resources that we offer would be available to a wide audience or wide group, but that the primary activity, I think, would be focused in the local community. So their vision statement is this. It took a long time to load, but it's very short. Gravity, a center for contemplative activism, exists to nurture the integral connection between contemplation and action. Gravity grounds social change in contemplative spirituality to do good better by facilitating contemplative retreats, spiritual direction, and Enneagram consultations. So that's a pretty concise vision statement, which is really what you want in a vision statement. I'm going to pull up their about as well and see how long that takes to load. But one thing I'll say is that, again, is loading, is when I was at Montreat this past fall for a conference and went to a workshop led by a woman named Mickey Scott Bay Jones, who works in the Nashville area. And she is what she calls herself a justice doula. And she sees there's actually a whole network in Nashville and in some other large cities of chaplains for social activism, for the work of social activism. And they're very organized when there is a march or when there's some sort of event where there are many people mobilized. They're the ones going to figure out how to provide the spiritual care for people that are participating in that. And we saw this at work in Charlottesville just a couple of years ago when we had our Care Bear network, which I was part of by going to the hospital that day. But there was a call for clergy to come and to provide spiritual care and support, whether that be prayer, offering space, very physical things like providing water, providing lavender scented sachets to smell. There are a lot of different ways that they do their work, but they see them. They understand that the justice work to which we are called is very taxing and tolling, and so they want to make sure they're addressing the spiritual grounding for that. So more about Gravity Center. After 20 years of grassroots work in some of the world's poorest slums, red light areas, and places of intense human suffering, Felina and Chris Hewerts have reflected on what it takes for communities to maintain a vibrant, growing spirituality in the face of human need by integrating faith-filled spiritual practice with modern daily life and service. Gravity exists to nurture the integral connection between contemplation and action. Our aim is to support the development of consciousness by making contemplative practices accessible to individuals and communities who care about their spirituality and want to make the world a better place. They offer contemplative retreats for people who long to nurture their relationship with God by cultivating mindfulness and rest in a world that is grossly out of balance with mindless, frantic action. They are grounding, deepening, and enlightening. And then they also offer spiritual direction, consultations, and then many different resources that we see on their website. So I hope that answers a little bit more the way that they see the connection between contemplation and activism. Thanks. So we've started to talk about this a little bit, whether there are particular elements that we could envision ourselves incorporating or adapting for our centering space. Are there any other thoughts on that? I love the idea of a big screen TV and having that as a resource, especially for maybe smaller groups who gather.
Yeah, I was thinking, when I was speaking about that, I was thinking about there are times when an individual wants to have a silent retreat, and then there are times when there would be small groups that could be using that as well. So you've got not just websites from other groups, but whatever we happen to put out, build our resources, and all will be available that way. And I'm also thinking, there are two phases or two components of action that we're talking about tonight. And one is action about what do we do? How are we going to get some of this going? And then the other part of action are what are the activities and all that we want to propose and have this be something that people will become involved in. So it's our action to get moving, and then it's the other action of the activities and things that we would develop.
One of the things that that brings to mind, Linda, back when we had the first dinner with the Bonita clients and drivers, one of the ideas that surfaced was that we could actually be a support mechanism for like the staff of New Bridges. So, and I guess it's maybe something that Mark said earlier, is I think that's a very viable action that we could initiate even now. Just by writing notes or making phone calls or, some way of reaching out or leaving care packages at their doorstep, some way to be a support mechanism to that staff at New Bridges, which is absolutely overwhelmed, I'm sure, right now by the needs of the immigrant community. So that's just a thought to toss out there.
That was one of the things, if you were at the mission, the Harvest Team event nurture class where the representative from New Bridges, Sandy Hernandez, was talking, and somebody asked how we could get involved. And that's pretty much what she said is, the staff, she's on the board, she's not a staff person, but she said the staff just are always working so hard and coming home late, and things like having a nutritious meal that's not necessarily fast food that they don't have to think about preparing, or coming in and helping to entertain kids that their staff have to bring to the office, or those kinds of things. But also writing notes, notes of appreciation. If we think about all of the different people that are in the community right now, really on the front lines in many ways, through Open Doors and Our Community Place and Pleasant View and the hospitals, how much a note of appreciation from someone they don't know would mean. So that also kind of brings us to a slightly different focus of action. As we think about action and activism, I think we had a clear sense of understanding that that contemplation and activism are connected, that the spiritual practices ground us for the work that we're called to. We also, at that point, this was all before COVID came along. And so I think the question of what action looks like now may be a little bit different. I think supporting people, like we were just talking about, and Virginia suggests also that as it's the end of the school year, the Keister teachers would also appreciate some token of appreciation. And, those who are working here in the neighborhood through Keister, that would be a great idea. We also talked a little bit earlier today, those of us who were on a call, about the desired action of getting out to have some face time. Whether we may be restricted in a lot of our movement and action right now, but what about going and standing on the lawns, or going to visit some of our folks who maybe are a little bit more isolated, especially having a very safe distance, but just having an actual friendly face that's not through a computer screen. And I don't know if, Nancy, you wanted to share at all about the caroling.
Yes, I was talking earlier about one of the things that some of our Pleasant View choir and worship team people have been doing, is going to some of the lawns of some of the houses that we have as part of Pleasant View, and safe distancing as they sing to the houses. And the neighbors have come out and kind of enjoyed it, and the people in the houses have come out to the windows and sung with them. People go there in cars, separated, and then stand separated. And Derek Yoder stood out and played the guitar in the middle of the driveway in a couple of places, and everybody sang with him. It's on, if you want to go to the Pleasant View Facebook, we have some videos of it that are on there too. It was really an incredible experience. We're going to do it again on Thursday.
Thank you. That's really great. And Judy, since both you and Jeff are on the call now, I wonder if you want to share a little bit about what pastoral care and what reaching out has been doing in terms of action in caring for folks right now, especially in the congregation.
Well, reaching out I was actually getting some ideas when you were talking just now, because we have limited our reaching out to the congregation, and there's a lot of need there, especially now. People who might have been isolated before, there are more of them because of the situation. But I think I will suggest that we might reach out in some of these other ways as well. So these are great ideas, and we're not a group that can be actively running around, but we can certainly call and write and even stand on lawns if need be. So I thank you for the suggestions.
I think there would definitely be some folks who would really appreciate, and who have in some ways insinuated you can come to my lawn and stand on the, porch, and my chairs are 20 feet apart. You can sit on my back deck, Jeff. And I haven't done that just out of protection for the people that probably don't want me doing that at this point. But I think, reaching out, and a number of people have been making phone calls. This congregation is incredibly skilled at that. And is doing that really, really well and keeping informed. So I think folks are trying really hard. The challenges for those who don't have the technology and others who aren't in pastoral care have been excellent at that. Yogi Gillette has really gone way above and beyond in trying to make connections for people and helping them. So again, I think some of these ideas are really marvelous. And as this time kind of expands, in that this is going to continue for a while and things do open up, the retirement communities and nursing home communities aren't going to open up anywhere near as quickly, I don't think. And so there may need to be some creativity in how we interact with those people in those communities. And that's just a thought. You know, you might be able to go sit on Don Allen's porch a whole lot faster than you can go to Linda's place and say hi. But, you know, there are definitely some ways to think about that.
We had a meeting today. They do an informational meeting on our closed circuit TV on Tuesdays and Fridays. And Josh led the meeting today, and he essentially said that with Virginia's guidelines for opening up various, you know, activities and all, it looks like the planned living communities and nursing homes and all will essentially be 2 weeks behind anything else that is happening, you know, across the state, and that there are new guidelines now from CMS on the opening of nursing homes, and I saw that on TV again tonight on the news. So that we will be behind, but they are still looking at trying to open things up a little bit more and relax a little bit more. It doesn't mean, Mark, that you are absolved from coming and dropping boxes of folders at the gatehouse for me.
My dog loves the trip. I'd really like to say to Judith and to Jeff that I deeply appreciate your efforts here. And I think that there's a way that we ought to widen the web and include people on a more informal basis and just sort of encourage a culture of contact where we make sure that we check in with people. You know, sort of like what a surrogate Sunday or something like that. And not to feel that you're, you know, it's all on the pastoral team. Rather, it's really something that the congregation could share. And part of my reasoning there is that maybe there are some among us who are among the most isolated or afflicted, who in fact could gain a lot from feeling they were reaching out to someone else, you know? And I love that idea. I mean, I had somebody on his deathbed one time call to ask me if I was okay. I thought, you know, dude, it's not about me. You know, how you doing? But it's, you know, I really do. I'm very, very grateful that you're doing that. And I'm also thinking that we can probably find a way, either as Myrtle or as a larger congregation, to deepen that sense of contact and of trust and of the invention of a new way of being a congregation.
So because I'm a little ignorant, can somebody remind me what the R and the E stand for in the CARE acronym?
R stands for renewal.
Entertainment.
No.
No, I don't know.
R stands for renewal and E stands for expression. So we'll be talking a little bit more about each of those in the coming weeks.
The reason I ask is thinking about, you know, Mark, your comments about, you know, is this an opportunity for Myrtle and others? Could this be an action component of the Myrtle project to invite people from the congregation to engage Myrtle through the Myrtle process to be in contact with people? We have a person in the church who shared with me, they about 3 weeks ago really were sliding into a kind of a really depressed state and really just feeling overwhelmed by all of this, and woke up one morning and just said, by golly, I'm going to call somebody that has a birthday this week. And they flipped through their calendar and they found somebody that had a birthday. And they called them and wished them a happy birthday and spent 20 minutes on the phone. And they realized that they knew lots of people that had birthdays. And so they started calling people that had birthdays 3 weeks ago to wish them happy birthday. And just that element of contact was life-giving, and really, they said, has pulled them through kind of a really low spot. So Mark, you're spot on with that observation. And I think, you know, the pastoral care team can do it. The session members have been calling, but to broaden that web, as you've said, and then maybe to find a way to tie it to this Myrtle project would help raise its awareness level too.
Right. Making people part of Myrtle has always been the problem. And I think you might have I think you're saying a great deal there, Jeff. I really do. I'm cheered to hear it, actually.
One of the pieces when we were discerning kind of what something might look like that nurtures lives of meaning and purpose, which is the overall purpose of the Myrtle grant itself and the project, was that we wanted a project that could transcend all of the many different calls that are that come up within the church. You know, our hope is that as we're responding to various calls of ministry and mission, that some of the needs change, and some hopefully no longer need the same support from us even, but that we wanted something that could support all of that work. And so the connection between contemplation and action and activism makes a lot of sense. And you know, as we're talking in this particular time, it makes a whole lot of sense that the action might look very, very different right now in the days of COVID, but that the need for these particular kinds of actions is even more important.
And I would articulate that, even though I don't know anything about it, renewal is going to be fundamental coming out of this experience. We're going to need some renewal and recovery, and probably some great entertainment at the end of this at the end of this part of this process.
Mm-hmm.
I would venture to say that expression can also be entertaining. So we won't lose sight of that.
And one of the things that we just touched on briefly in a phone call this afternoon was the idea of having a healing service in some form, whether it's, again, you know, preferably not anything on Zoom, but in some form at the church, outside, or however we might be able to do it, as part of our action of renewal. So, you know, so that might be something, again, it's action, but it's also the purpose of that would be some sort of renewal for individuals and for the congregation as a whole.
I also liked Virginia's idea that she sent by email this afternoon after our other meeting, of having basically what amounted to epiphany dinners or epiphany picnics, where 8 to 10 of us would be in somebody's backyard, you know, shouting at each other over the distance, bringing our ear horns, and just having a way of being in each other's presence. And it's that word right there that has had a lot of weight for me today. What does it mean to be present? Because I do not feel present to any of you right now, right? I feel like I'm trying, but I'm not there. And that does require, I mean, you think about the depth of our evolutionary past, you know, eons ago when we ran around in the savannas and slept in heaps, right? We were present to each other physically. And I don't think this is the time to begin to deny that fundamental nature. I think we really have to hold to that. So I love your idea, Virginia. I'm gonna set one up, right? Everybody has to wear a mask, but I'll set one up.
So that was the thought, that we'd have hosts, and then if people wanted to attend, they just sign up with their host at the given times, and we could offer different times now. It could be in morning, it could be happy hour, it could be whatever. So, thank you, Mark.
Yeah. The Pentecost season has talked about arranging some of those as well, although virtually, which is very different from what you're talking about, but also very important, because there are many of our folks who are not going to be able to make it out to the lawn, including all of our folks in retirement communities right now. So I like the both and. We were going to ask the question about what gifts you might bring, or what gifts you think the community brings to this kind of action and activism. And I think a lot of that a lot of the action and activism we know because we tell those stories, and maybe we see what's going on. And I think we could tell more of those stories for sure. But I love that what we've highlighted here are some actions and some gifts that, such as writing letters or putting out some lawn chairs in your yard, that are very important actions right now that we may overlook because we don't necessarily think of them as action. I am aware of our time, and so I'm about to transition us out, but I want to leave room for a little bit if there are any more comments or anything else that anyone would like to share.
Well, I was just going to say that with Virginia's idea of our socially distant lawn parties, there are enough people here at Sunnyside that would certainly be a possibility on the campus. Now, the assisted living and healthcare people in the Highlands are not able to leave their buildings. In fact, they can't really leave their rooms for much of anything. But there are enough people in independent living that we certainly could do something like that here. And we have a knitting group here. It's not the Hearts and Hands from Trinity, but there is also a Glenside knitting group. And we already have on our docket that the first really, really nice day without little rains and sprinkles and stuff, we're going to have an impromptu come as you are, in somebody's driveway, and everybody bring a lawn chair and their knitting, and we'll continue because we haven't had that for, below these many months either. So don't count the nursing homes out. They just would need to look a little different.
All right. Any other thoughts before we transition to the rest of our evenings? Great. Well, as a reminder, we are going to be gathering again to talk about renewal and expression. We mentioned already a possible service of lament or healing and wholeness, and then other opportunities for creative expression or entertainment in these challenging days. And we have shifted our schedule just a little bit. So we're going to be meeting the next 2 Tuesdays rather than Tuesday, Thursday, Tuesday, Thursday. So we'll gather again next on Thursday evening at 7 o'clock.
Tuesday evening.
Yes, Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock. Do any of us really know what day it is anyway?
No.
7 days from now, once we come to the same day again.
So in the vein of contemplation, we invite all of you to participate in the Lectio Divina that Mark Dewey is offering on Zoom on Wednesday and Friday mornings at 8:30. Just from my own personal experience, I would tell you that it's been extremely meaningful. So if you can join us, we would love to have you there. The information to join by Zoom is on the Trinity Facebook page. So as we close, I'd like to share with us a prayer that is adapted from a prayer for action by Caitlin Curtis. So let us pray. Oh God, when it feels like the world is on fire, we don't always know what to do. Do we light candles and pray? Do we scream and yell in the streets? Do we open our wallets? Do we prepare guest rooms in our homes? Do we write letters and make phone calls? We don't always know what it looks like to make crooked ways straight, to stand up to injustice. We don't always know what it looks like to call oppressors to account, to bring them into the full awareness of the injustice they hold over others. But we are begging for mercy, for justice, for all those things you tell us to look for. Oh God, teach us what self-care looks like. Show us what strength looks like. Show us what love looks like. Teach us to be brave, we pray, when we have no idea what it looks like. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all and have a wonderful evening.
Good night.